Have a seat button. So, welcome back. I just want to take a moment summarizing what we've seen so far. Okay, so our focus is on the modern school of economic thought. We didn't talk about the Indian school of economic thought, the Middle Eastern or the Persian school of economic thought. So the modern school of economic thought, right, started with Adam Smith. We call them Adam Smith, David Ricardo, John Stuart Mill, and they're considered to be, they're called the classical school of economic thought, right? The classical school of economic thought had a shortcoming. The shortcoming was that they believed in the objective theory of value, okay? They thought that the value of a painting is embedded in the cost of production, right? The labor theory of value. They thought that the value of a computer is embedded in the cost of production. So that was a shortcoming. And the reason it's a shortcoming, because the marginalists said, wait a minute, value is not objectively determined, but subjectively determined. So a value of a Picasso painting that's worth $100 million doesn't reflect the cost of production. It reflects your subjective valuation, right? So if you dig a hole in the desert and you sweat your days, doesn't mean that there's a customer for it, right? It could be valueless. So value is determined subjectively by the buyer on the demand side of the market. Sweating, creating something could be valueless, okay? So that was the discrepancy, that was the shortcoming of the classical school, right? So Menger comes and says, wait a minute, value is subjective. So following the classical school, we call it the marginalist revolution over the classical school of economic thought. So from the classical school of economic thought, there were other branches, right? So we get to the Marxian school of economic thought. Actually, what the marginalists did, they discounted the labor theory of value. The Marxian school of economics, actually, they adopted it. They said, wait a minute, the value of a good reflects the cost of production. I don't care about your subjective valuation, but this is it costs $100. The workers they need to get paid the whole full amount of the $100. So there's no role for entrepreneurship, and anything short of that, the Marxians said this is exploitation of labor. So they came up with the labor theory of exploitation, that the price is not for the good or the service, right? Is not going as wages to the factors of production. So there's no role for entrepreneurship. And so that was their, they adopted the labor theory of value. So from the classical school, we have two opposite, diametrically opposed branches, the marginalist school, Carl Menger, and the Marxian school of economic thought. From the marginalist school of economic thought, actually economics became more and more mathematical, empiricism, they use the scientific method, it's called. What is the scientific method? Right, to make observations, to acquire data, and test the data, test your hypothesis, right? And unfortunately, I call the scientific method unscientific. Okay, it's very unscientific to use inductive methodology in the social sciences. So we prefer, as Austrian, the deductive methodology, and we're going to talk about deductive methodology shortly. So the neoclassical school of economic thought, right, adopted mathematical use, called sometimes positivism, inductive analysis, scientific method, and we're going to use these terms interchangeably. Earlier there was a question, Dishe asked the question whether the mathematical modeling and the neoclassical school, whether it contributed anything to the science of economics, right? So obviously the answer is yes, they contributed, right? So their contribution is not null, but their contribution is negative, okay? Their contribution is negative. Why is it negative? Because they took the humanity out of us and they turned us into mathematical equations. And so that they could differentiate, they could use calculus. So we became symbols in equations. They had to assume averages. They had to divide and say, you know, there's the capitalists and the workers, and the government objective function to maximize the well-being of both groups. So it's like there is no heterogeneity in our preferences. And there are no two human beings that are alike. We're heterogeneous. We can't be aggregated, right? And the source of macroeconomics is founded on neoclassical microeconomics. Macro is founded on neoclassical macro. And macroeconomics, right, distorts the reality. It takes the humanity of us, right? It aggregates numbers, and it has objective functions, and it maximizes those objective functions. So macroeconomics and neoclassical economics actually destroyed the science of economics, okay? And macroeconomics does not belong into the economics department. It's a macro should belong to this department of bureaucratic studies. It should maybe perhaps be part of the political science department rather than economics department. There is no such thing as macro. It never existed. It came about after 1936, after the publication of Keynes' book. It's a new phenomenon. It started in the early 20th century, 1910, 1915, 1920, 1923. The NBR was formed, the data aggregation started. So it's a relatively new science for management of large number of groups of people, right? So it's a bureaucratic management, and it's not part of economics. It should be, sent back, shifted to the political science department. So that would be the answer, that its contribution is not null, the new contribution is actually negative. So we talked about the neoclassical school earlier. Matthew presented the characteristics of the neoclassical school of economic thought being robotic, redundant, repetitive, right? The active is not a real man, but it's a robotic individual. Matthew talked about the Keynesian school of economic thought, which built itself on neoclassical microeconomics. We talked about the characteristics of the Keynesian school. We're going to talk further more into the future. Per Byron's presentation was on the Austrian school of economic thought, right? So we're going through the various schools of economic thought. So the Austrian school of economic thought, what were the characteristics of the Austrian school of economic thought, right? Individual methodological individualism. Society cannot act, we cannot aggregate individual. We talked about the aggregate variables, poverty, inequality, trade deficit. What does it mean, these aggregated variables, right? He said they were worthless, so I'm going to look at a few more examples. So we covered all the schools of economic thought and all the generations of the Austrian school of economic thought. So what I would like to do in this lecture, actually go back in time. Go back in time before the classical school of economic thought, all the way back in time to ancient China. Okay, so let's talk about the Chinese economic thought. So Austrian economics traces its roots back to Lao Tzu and Taoism, 6th, 4th century BC. Okay, 6th to 4th century BC. This is the first wave. Okay, I don't want to call them these are not the generations within the Austrian school, but these are the waves that preceded. These people are the forerunners of the Austrian school of economic thought. Lao Tzu and Taoism. Taoism emphasizes natural order, which 100,000 years later on, right, Hayek is talking about the natural order that arises out of a seeming chaos. And harmony, which can be seen as antecedent to the spontaneous order emphasized in Austrian economics and Hayek. Lao Tzu, best known as the author of The Way of Virtue, was regarded as the world's first free market libertarian. Some key principles of Taoism: the individual and his happiness were the key unit to society. And this is the idea of methodological individualism, that only human beings act. Menger said his code is man, right, is the beginning and end of every economy. Man is the beginning, not society. So individualism is present in Taoism. They talked about that the government is viewed as the vicious oppressor of the individual. A famous quote by Lao Tzu, it says, the more the laws, the more the interventions, the more the regulations are given prominence, the more thieves and robbers there will be. Okay? The more the laws, the more the regulations, the more the interventions, the more in the marketplace, motives and rubbers there will be. Chuan Tzu, these are the followers. I'm going to mention the few key followers of Lao Tzu and Taoism. 4th century BC, Chuan Tzu, considered the first anarchist in the history of human thought. Right? So what is anarchism? We mentioned this word several times. So what is anarchism? Anarchism is not the absence of order, because it's an anarchic order, so there is an order. Anarchy is the absence of a centralized authority, centralized political authority. So anarchy doesn't mean disorder, anarchy doesn't mean chaos. Anarchy means order, a market order, or better yet, what we call a proprietary contractual order, okay? And we're going to talk about proprietary contractual order in the provision of jurisprudence, security, how to deal with externalities, common resources, homesteading principle, etc. So all the problems that you would think would occur in a marketplace, how does an anarchic social order, a proprietary contractual society, deals with these issues that you may think they are market failures or externalities. And I challenge my students, tell me one market failure, I'll give you an A in my course. I've been saying this for 10 years, yet I'm waiting for a student to challenge my view. Give me one market failure, right? Say the market is failing. And I will be able to trace it to an intervention, a government intervention that may have happened 100 years from today, right? If the housing market is failing today, I could search, you could search, and then find an intervention somewhere that happened yesterday or 10 years. But things takes time. There's the ripple effect, an event that takes place, an intervention in one part of the world will affect another part of the world, in another industry after a decade. So like, all these events are interconnected. So we don't talk about the healthcare, provision of healthcare. Why is it so expensive? How is the market failing? Well, because in the 1930s, there was interventionism, and then that led to certain other interventions. So we're in a web of interventions and the implications of this intervention. So an intervention creates a distortion. Now, these distortions require new interventions to correct them. So there are new interventions, but these interventions via the ripple effect create new interventions, new distortions. So it's back and forth. Now, a smart student in a classroom will say, well, in 1989, there was a particular policy regarding the labor market, the housing market, and the government took this position and they introduced a law and it fixed the problem. Well, yes, it could fix the problem, right? So you have so many interventions, so many distortions. So a particular intervention may correct a distortion. But the argument is, why is there a distortion to start with? So you have to trace it all the way back and then go to the initial intervention that creates a series of distortions and interventions and make your correction there. Also, you should consider the ripple effect. Yes, an intervention may correct a distortion, but then the intervention itself may create other distortions, and Bastia calls it what we should investigate, what is seen and what is unseen. Most of these distortions are ripple effects that are not seen to us at the moment of the intervention, but may be visible a decade or may be visible in other part of the economy. Chuan Tzu, spontaneous order and laissez-faire principles. Good order results spontaneously when things are let alone. Similar, this is what Proudhon and Hayek and Adam Smith picked up years later, on hundreds of years into the future. The world stabilizes itself. Okay, the world stabilizes and does, so these are all quotation marks, and does simply not need governing. In fact, it should not be governed. I mean, these are very advanced views, right? 4th century BC. Chuan Tzu's philosophy emphasizes natural harmony in the absence of external control and skepticism toward the necessity of political governance. We might think that we're advancing, like the physical sciences we're advancing, right? Physics is moving forward. Mathematics is moving forward. We're solving new equations, we're discovering new connections. So these are sciences, by increments they're advancing. But don't ever think that the social sciences are also incrementally advancing into a future. We can make a 180 degrees U-turn and go back, right? So that's what we've done. So Kuhn talks about that the social sciences are not advancing in increments. It's not like, oh, the discovery of democracy was a better form of governance than monarchy, or than a dictatorship, or than a theocracy, right? So the social sciences are not advancing. We're not discovering better ways to organize societal relationship. We could go in circles for 100 years, 1 centuries, we could go back, right? So obviously these people discovered things that were dormant, they died, and then we have new forms of governance, new forms of interactions, or economic system, political systems. And now we're coming back to what Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu are saying. This is what Austrian economics is based on, right? So the social sciences are not like the hard sciences. We don't necessarily improving ourselves. Actually, we could go backward thousands of years. We could go forward, upward, sideways, up and down, roller coaster, right? So that's the relationship of, with respect to the advancement of the social sciences. So we're not in a better place today than we were 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. So Chuang Tzu's philosophy emphasized natural harmony in the absence of external control and skepticism towards the necessity of political governance. Tao Jing-Yan, 4th century AD. Okay, again, this is several hundred, over 1,000 years ago. He elaborated on Chuang Tzu. He said, in the stateless age, neither warfare nor disorder existed. Actually, China lived a period of time where there were no centralized authority. There were smaller, like the states of Europe, rather than the nation states. There were small, I don't want to call them kingdoms, but smaller cities. And there was less war, right? There was less violence. And he said, in the stateless age, meaning when the centralized authority didn't exist, right, interactions, there was neither warfare nor disorder. So it's giving us a historical proof, view of history. History of government is history of violence, of plundering the weak. These are quotes from Tao Jing-Yan. Disputes among the ordinary people are merely trivial matters. What happens in a decentralized social order? There is a dispute. I mean, obviously, anarchy or contractual society is not the recipe, is not the for a utopian society. There'll be criminals, there'll be murderers, there'll be rapists, there'll be crime, right? But relative to the royal armies and the battalions and the nuclear weapons and the billions of dollars and the trillions of dollars that are being spent, right? This is a trivial matter. There'll be small fights, family fights, disputes, road rages, etc. Right? So these are trivial matters compared to our royal armies and the battalions and the nuclear weapons and the $1 trillion of expenditures that makes people who have no enmity. I mean, I think it was Per Byland or earlier Matthew mentioned, right? I mean, the US is waging a war with Iran, but I mean, you don't know, you're waging a war against someone, you may end up killing one another without being enemies, without being, there be an antagonistic relationship, right? And then it's orders coming down, so it just takes the humanity out of you. So these are small fights, small incidents will occur in a contractual society, but not at the scale where 160 million people died, right, in the hands of their own government. It's called democide, not genocide, democide. You could look up Rommel's, close to 160 million people died at the hands of their own government. It wasn't like a war between countries, but their own government, the government that they voted out of fear for protection ended up killing them. And we mentioned Stalin, Hitler, Mao Zedong, right, Pol Pot, and Mussolini, and the list goes on. But you have a question here.
I'm interested in where you see the line between centralized authority and statism. Because from my perspective, it seems like centralized authority is pretty much like biologically encoded. Mm-hmm. And if you have a chimp troop, they're going to elect somebody, the alpha, because they get, because whoever, usually a he, but they're going to moderate the group and resolve conflicts because it's just easier for the group. And in exchange for that, he gets more food, he gets more sex. It seems like this is very biologically encoded to have a centralized authority. And so is that something you disagree with, or do you think that is different from a state?
I'm not distinguishing between centralized authority and the state. There's no difference for me. If I own this room and I want to make it smoking, and there are constraints. They make it an entity, comes into my house, violates my property rights, and says there's no smoking. Now, I'm really not interested if that entity was democratically elected or it was a monarch. The end result to me, that an exterior force, like another entity, came and violated my property rights, and you said you cannot smoke cigarettes in your restaurant. So that's why I'm using the term interchangeably centralized authority or statism. Now, for other purposes, if you raise other questions, maybe there is a distinction, but for my purpose, I'm using it interchangeably because the end result is the same. I really don't care. It was, collectively, it was centralized, a monarchy that made that decision, or it was a collective decision made. Still, it's a violation of my natural rights or my rights to my property. I hope that answers the question. Yeah. The system itself is the problem. Again, we fall into this trap all the time. We think it's the person. Oh, if we get rid of this president, we'll bring another one. Or if the Democrats or the Republicans or the Libertarians or right or left. We always think it's like, well, the next person is going to be better. But we're always disappointed. They took a poll in the US and around the world. Statism and centralized authority or politicians are falling out of favor. Majority of people dislike politicians and dislike politics. It's just that they don't understand that there is an alternative. They think it's a necessary evil. They think in the absence of centralized authority, there's going to be chaos. Who's going to run the roads? Who's going to run security? How about they think it's just going to be chaos, like the wild, wild West. By the way, the West was not as wild as they made it seem, okay? Don't be tricked by all these movies that they're showing. There was actually more order than there is order now. But we can talk about that at some other time. So, in the absence of centralized order, don't fear. There is no anarchy. There is no chaos. Anarchy is an order. It's a decentralized order. It operates better. It's more harmonious, more productive, more efficient. Okay. So the idea is that there is something wrong with the system, and most people are indoctrinated. They're naive. I don't know, through religion, through family, through education. They just think there must be some hierarchy. The 10 Commandments, right? These are like big, there are rules. You don't follow the rules, oh my God, it's chaos. It's the state of nature, it's brutish, it's hard. People are at each other's throat. That's what Hobbes described the state of nature, right? So out of fear, the politics of obedience we talked about yesterday, right? So the system is the problem. It's not the entity, it's not the individual. The system is fundamentally wrong, and we need a paradigm shift to get rid of the system entirely. So it's like you need a switch in your head to understand that a contractual society, a decentralized social order, will operate more effectively, more efficiently, and more harmoniously. I think earlier there was a question, I want to pick up on that. Karen asked about that you needed, what interested you is the now, right? I mean, is the now. I mean, there are hungry people today, and then policies or market solutions may take time. I think that was
the tension between the two.
So the Austrian perspective, a free market perspective, I don't want to help the poor. You know what I want to do? I want to eradicate poverty. And to eradicate poverty, it can't happen over time. So in the way, step by step, I'm moving towards prosperity and the eradication of poverty. But if I fall back into the trap, I want to help the poor over here, I'm postponing the move towards eradicating poverty. So while I'm doing this, I'm helping the poor, actually getting myself into more and more poverty. The size of the pie is shrinking more and more. So yes, it's a tough world, it's a competitive world, but the focus should be on eradicating poverty rather than helping a poor individual over here or over there. Nevertheless, I also mentioned that there is a warm glow. These individuals, before the 1930s, when we didn't have a system of welfare programs, people were not dying at the doors of hospitals. Right? I mean, everybody was poor, everybody was dying. But when there was some wealth, unequal distribution of wealth, a natural distribution of wealth, people were not dying at the doors of hospital. There were organizations, whether it's the church, whether it's the private organization, group, ethnic organization, national organization. The groups, they got all kinds of groups. Basketball people will come together, will help one another. The Jews will get together, the Arabs will get together, the Muslims, women's club, men's clubs, boxing club, right? So there were all these organizations that were helping one another. So there was warm glow, there was insurance schemes, right? Insurance mechanism, that's what it is. Friends coming together and making a decision that we're going to help one another. That's how the idea of insurance started in a market economy, right? So, so my focus would be not on that individual. Yes, that's a micro issue. I want to, hopefully there are solutions to that. The warm glow, right? And history has shown us, yes, I mean, if everyone is poor, they're going to die. But as soon as there is somewhat some prosperity, these people are moving forward with us. So my goal is to eradicating poverty rather than helping the poor at that moment. So I'm more temporal, intertemporal analysis rather than the static. It's a more dynamic approach to the solution of poverty rather than static, momentary solution. I hope that answers your second question. Yeah. He concluded that the idea that a strong government is needed to combat disorders confuses cause and effect. But the idea that you need a strong government to combat disorder is actually, you're confusing. The government itself, centralized authority, is creating the distortion, is creating this order. Sessuma Chen, my favorite. He recognizes human nature and man as habitual seekers of wealth. So he understands human nature. We're seeking wealth, we're seeking health, we're seeking prosperity, we want to survive, we're seeking homeostatic equilibrium. He saw market specialization and division of labor as producing goods and services orderly. I might want to make this bold, orderly, right? So he saw that market interaction and division of labor is orderly because we both benefits. If there is an exchange, it's a win-win situation. It's not coercive, okay? He said if the free market is self-governing, what need is there for government directives? And the free market is self-governing. When you go to the supermarket, you buy your apple, you get your orange. When was the last time you went to the mall or a supermarket, you couldn't find the good or the service that you desired? It's always there. They never misses. If one supermarket fell short, July 4th weekend, they forget to order extra paper plates, you go to the other supermarket. That's the competitive process. You don't get it right, someone else get it right. It's competitive, there's multiple suppliers. But with centralized, there's only one supplier. And if that supplier misses, then you're doomed, right? If that supplier gets corrupted, then you're going to pay the price. And what is corruption index? How is the corruption index calculated? You know how it's calculated? It's government corruption. It's bribery to the bureaucrats and things like that. Corruption, there's no market corruption. It doesn't make, it's an absurd term to say market is corrupt. It doesn't work that way. It will be, it's a miscalculation. You charge something more than the market price is in a neighboring village. Quickly there is arbitrage. Quickly people will discover that the quality of the good that you're selling is below the quality of a comparative item selling side by side on the same aisle. So people will switch there. So there is a mechanism to weed out, right, this corruptive behavior or a deceitful behavior in the marketplace. But there's no mechanism that could take out deceitfulness and corruption from a centralized entity, such as the Fed, such as the US, and all the three letters, or the FDA, for example. We're going to talk about the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, approving a certain drug, not approving another drug. Now they, dictate the machinery, the drugs, procedures, doctors, right? The food and drug, what we can eat, what we cannot eat, which drugs could enter the market, right? So it's a centralized authority, right? The incentives of the bureaucrats are not aligned with the incentives of market participants. It's homogeneous, it's self-preservation, right? Rather than aligning themselves via profit mechanism to market participants. That's the role of profits in economics. Plays such an important role. Okay, the profits actually tell you what you're doing as value in the marketplace. It's not an accounting measure. right? It has for an Austrian perspective, these play. It's a means of communication. It's like the price mechanism, economic calculation, loss and profit are means of communication in the marketplace. Okay, and the best mechanism of communication. How do millions, billions of people in the marketplace voice their opinion? How can Karen say, I like green apples over red apples? Is she going to pick up a speaker, walk around Grand Boulevard and saying, I'm Karen, I like green apples, or, you know? I mean, where does she go to social media? How is she going to communicate to planet Earth that she has a preference for red apples? You know how? Only through the price mechanism. All she has to do, go to the market and order an extra apple, a red apple over a green apple. Okay? That's a means of, that enters, it's a central nervous system of the economy, is the price mechanism. That information, that preference manifests itself in the marketplace. She is heard. Her penny is a vote, and she has a skin in the game. Because democratic voting, you have no skin in the game. Your vote should not be counted, should not be calculated. There is no cost benefit to you. You vote on something you have no knowledge about, it doesn't reflect in any good way or bad way on you, right? It's a vote. But every vote should have a cost and benefit analysis within the person. That's how she's making a vote by buying the red apple over the green apple. Her voice is heard. The whole planet Earth knows what she desires. That the preference travels right through the marketplace, through the price mechanism, into the producers, wherever they are, in China, Zimbabwe. The producer gets that message, as if she communicated to the producers without knowing who the producer is. That message travels, and then the producer hears, oh, there's preference for red apples. Let me switch my production from green apples to red apples. That's the beauty of the marketplace. That's why we shouldn't touch the prices, put taxes and tariffs, distort prices, you know, make the price of baby food lower the price, people can't buy. I mean, these are all distortionary interventions in the marketplace. So finally, so the market governs itself, right? Self-governing. What needs there for government directives? Why do I need government directives? Everything that governments provide, there is a shortage of. There's a shortage of water because they take care of the supply lines and then they distribute the water. They subsidize the water to the farmers, pay $7, $8 for 327,000 cubic meters, whereas the consumers pay 700. So they intervene in the market. They subsidize a product. They put price controls. They put restrictions on the quantity and the quality. These are all interventionists that create distortions in the marketplace. We don't need them. The market is self-correcting, it self-corrects itself, and no intervention is needed. They also understood the role of entrepreneurship. Such an important role. Pick up any economics textbooks, go to any college or university in the US, pick up a textbook, and then show me if there is a chapter on entrepreneurship. Nothing, it's non-existent. And entrepreneurs are the people that are finding solutions to the externalities. They're bridging the gap between you and me. I have a desire, right? I'm an entrepreneur. You have a desire. You want to learn Austrian economics. And there are donors that get warm glow. They want everybody to get an education on market economics, right? So I'm the entrepreneur. He wants to contribute to fund an institution. You want to take courses, so I'm the entrepreneur in the middle, bringing you together. So now it's like everybody's happy. I'm happy, you're happy, and the donors are happy, right? So that's the role of entrepreneurship, is bridging the gap between the people, creating harmony, creating interdependence, interconnectedness. That's the role of the entrepreneur. Okay, so economists, we don't look at entrepreneur as, oh, it's maximizing profits. No, entrepreneurship plays a role above and beyond just maximizing money. It's not about money. It's maximizing satisfaction, maximizing preference, creating order, creating harmony in the marketplace. Okay, we're not just businessmen over here, interested, selfish businessmen, and that's how socialism looks at us. That's how mainstream thinks about free market economists. By the way, all your professors, all the colleges, all the universities, they're all socialists. They just don't know it. Okay, they pretend to be market economists, but they're socialists. Okay, they don't know it. You should tell them. Okay, that's what they are. I mean, they're all interventionists. They're all collectivists, right? Macroeconomics is like suddenly the most important field of economics. where it should be delegated to the Department of Political Science rather than economics. They all used mathematical modeling. They dehumanized the human being, right, by taking our consciousness, our preferences away, putting us in equations, small symbols, categorizing us into groups, the capitalists and the workers. Well, I'm everything. I'm a worker. I'm lecturing now. I'm also a capitalist. I have some money in the stock market. Everyone is both. It's not like the dividing and conquering. That's a socialist, right? The bourgeois, there's the capitalist, there's the bourgeois pig, and there are the workers. Doesn't operate. It's, as long as you have $1 in the bank, you're considered a capitalist by the definition. That means you have capital that's being invested because your dollar is not sitting idle at the bank, it's being utilized by investors or innovators. They want to pull the money, right? And they want to use, they want to borrow that money. Under the 10% reserve ratio, 90% of the money that you deposit, if you deposit $1 in the bank, 90 cents is being loaned out. So your money is being utilized to buy houses, to build businesses, bridges, right? So by the definition of the word, it's not, capitalism is not quantitative, it's a qualitative idea. So if you have $1 in the bank, you're a capitalist because your money is being utilized for other purposes, right? If you have $1 billion, it doesn't make a difference. So there is no, in the classroom, there is no worker and a capitalist. In one industry, I'm a worker, I'm a lecturer, laborer. In another industry, I'm investing money. So it's not like stop dividing, this is the laborers and these are the capitalists. This is old mentality, bourgeois, agrarian, mercantilism, where at that time, yes, there was the nobility and the serfs. We don't have it now. Okay? Most of the billionaires, trillionaires today are self-made. Well, I can start with the Google guys, Sergey Brin, Larry Page. Dropouts. Okay, they started in their garage and their first, what is it called, the word, PTO or first time that your stocks goes into the public, right? IPO, yeah, IPO, right? Yeah, IPO. Their IPO was in the millions, billions of dollars. I don't recall, like, you know, they were working out of their garage. What's the other guys, the Microsoft guy? Bill Gates is a college dropout. Most of these people, I mean, Sergey Brin, Larry Page were just like, I think Larry Page was from Israel, Sergey Brin was from Russia. These are people that came to the US at a young age. Steve Jobs, right? He was conceived in Syria. He was born, I think, in Europe, you know. His dad is Syrian, his mom is European. These are people, regular people like us. It's not like they were born in wealth. Yeah, there is a percentage of group that are born into generation wealth. But most of the millionaires today are self-made, okay? So there's no group. It's not like you're in the category of being a serf for generations. It doesn't work like that. Any one of you, one day will be billionaires, CEOs of companies, okay? And don't forget to make a contribution to the institute. Okay? He was the world's first monetary theorist, increasing. He said, so interesting. So at that time, do you know what debasing the quality of coinage is? Anyone has a quarter or let me see. Oh, except this one. 10 cents, quarter. Anyone has a quarter?
I have a penny though.
A penny doesn't have one.
Oh, a dime.
A dime, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, dime is good. So let's exchange the penny for the dime.
Thank you.
So, he was the first monetary theorist, increasing the quantity and debasing the quality of coinage. The government depreciates money value and raises prices. This is inflation. So, the history of inflation is kings, pharaohs, sultans, right, monarchs, dictators, they want money. Okay, so the way they want money in the old days, you had gold and metal money was the dominant form of medium of exchange for centuries, right? We started with barley in Mesopotamia, but then eventually people caught up and the dominant medium of exchange all the way to 1971 internationally was gold and silver. Up to 1933 domestically was gold and silver. Then we went domestically into fiat money. 1971 we went international fiat money created out of thin air. But until then, gold and silver played a role. So what would governments do? They generate money. They're waging wars. They're getting poor. They want to create more money. So they pick up all the gold in the market. And what do they do to the gold? They debase it. What is debasing? Shaving it. Before shaving it, what they used to do, this is 99% gold, so they take 4% the gold out of the gold coin, and they mix another metal, like a cheaper metal, into it. And then it goes back into circulation. So suddenly, out of thin air, the government is doing what? Making money. But what's happening to the actual value of the gold? Now, it's not 99% gold, it's 95% mixed with some other metals, right? And then before that, and then at some point in time, there was shaving. You know what shaving is? You see the ridges over here on the dime, if you see, you touch it. There are ridges, right? You believe me? You want more proof, or everybody believes me? Want to try? And what are the ridges? Because what people will, go ahead.
What people would do is they would shave the edges and create more money.
Create more money, they would shave the edges. That's why they put the ridges. So when you shave, you lose the ridges, and then it's not, oh, like you're stealing money. I mean, this is gold. I mean, it was gold, right? So that's why. So the idea of having the ridges is something like that stayed with us from previous centuries. Now they put ridges. I don't know why. I mean, no one's going to shave like, you know.
Yeah, they would shave it.
Say it again.
They put ridges so you can't shave it.
You can't shave it. Yes, they put ridges so you cannot shave it. It's good. Bravo, Narek. I thought you were sleeping all day. He's focused. Thank God. Okay. He plays chess, just looking outside, and then after I'm like, it's your turn, and he comes, and then he does something, and he's looking, I don't know what he's looking at, and he's never focused, but I guess he's learning something. So, that's what debasing is. And what are we doing today with money? Under fiat system, we don't need to debase, we don't need to share. What do? We just print. There's no authority, there's no limit, you just print. So when you print, what happens? When you print money, what happens? What happens to the value of the dollar in your pocket? It goes down. So when the value of the dollar is going down in your pocket, that means you are being, in a way, you're being taxed. So it's an indirect form of taxation. It's a hidden way. If I come, I say, oh, you know, Kunmi, I'm going to tax you. If you're paying out of 100, you're giving me 10%, I want to increase by 5%. You're going to rebel, you're not going to like me, you're not going to vote for me. So what do? I go and print money. I increase the money supply. So the purchasing power of the dollar in your pocket is declining because there's more of it, right? So the more money, we're chasing the same number of goods. Productivity is not changing. So there's 10 apples in the classroom. We have more money. Now we're bidding. So the price is going up. So in a way, we're poorer, right? It's an indirect form of taxation. And the beauty of the Fed, which is, I think, the most evil entity in the world, you know, is any Fed. I mean, Fed is the U.S. government, but any centralized money authority is that, and the U.S. in particular, is that we have more dollars outside of the U.S. than in the U.S. So when the U.S. government, the Fed, is printing money, they're not only taxing us, they're taxing the rest of the world. Everybody's being taxed. The taxi driver in Bangladesh is being taxed. The sumo wrestler in Japan is being taxed. Right? The fisherman in Thailand is being taxed because all the world's trade currency is the dollar. We call it the petrodollar. Any exchange in the world, if the Japanese want to buy from the Brazilians meat, they have to convert their currency into the dollar, and then send it as a dollar. If he wants to buy, if Canadians wants to buy from Mexico, they have to convert there into dollar. So the dollar is the international medium of exchange. All the countries around the world, they hold dollars. And when the US is printing dollar bills over here, then we're indirectly taxing the rest of the world. Imagine if all these trillions of dollars that we printed, if it was only kept constrained to the US, the price of coffee right now would have been $100. What is the biggest US export? Inflation. US exports inflation because the prices over there is also rising. Price of petrol is rising. I mean, think about this society where prices are continuously rising. Common sense dictates that prices should always go down. Technology, we're better at producing. We have machinery to produce paper cups. Why is the price of the paper cup of milk is going up and up? when we have the technology to produce it at a lower cost. That's the gain that we don't see. It's like the gap with loss. We just say, oh, inflation didn't go up that much. Under this administration, it went up 3% for... Actually, we should be deflationary. We should be in a deflationary every year. The money in our pocket should buy more and more and more. But human ingenuity is so large, so expensive, that we're still better off. Our standards are going up. But imagine if you take away all the waste, we would be having this conversation on the moon. We would have a Menger Institute on the moon. We'd be traveling like, I mean, imagine all the wealth that has been destroyed, right, by statism over the past hundreds, if not thousands of years. I am way behind. It happens all the time, huh? I think once I was at UCLA, it's a 3-hour lecture, okay? And then after 3 hours and 15 minutes, they're like, oh, please, like it's been, and then I look, I was on like slide number 1. So I don't know why, you remember something like that?
It's like, so you end up covering everything.
Yeah, I'm covering, yeah, you're right, I'm jumping, yeah.
You're not keeping up with the slides.
Yeah. No, this time I didn't keep up with the slides at all.
The slides gotta keep up with you.
Yeah. Okay, quickly, I just want to finish up because most of it is in your readings. The Spanish scholastics, right? 15, 16, actually, let me go because David Gordon should be here any moment. The Spanish scholastic, this is the second wave. So we have the Chinese Taoism and Lao Tzu, and these are the forerunners of the Austrian school. Several centuries later on, the ideas of Lao Tzu and Taoism is revived through the Spanish scholastic. These are the mainly Jesuit and Dominican religious order. It's a Catholic order. They were working, teaching theology at the University of Salamanca in northwest Madrid. The university still exists. Every year, Austrian economists, they have a gathering there. Okay, so maybe we can organize one of the pillars in Spain and then go as a group and have our, 2-day event in Spain. So the Salamanca, University of Salamanca, they were all followers. Thomas Aquinas, 13th century religious scholar Thomas Aquinas. He used Thomas Aquinas is one of the scholars that used the deductive methodology, logical inference, right? Step by step. If I'm taller than Karen and Karen is taller than Kumi, therefore I'm taller than Kulai, that's the deductive. It could get very complex, very advanced, but that's the idea. So the followers of St. Thomas Aquinas, they adopted the deductive methodology, and it was picked up by the Spanish scholastics. Scholastic laws, they believe in existence and universality of economic laws. If you remember, economic laws are tautological. What does tautology mean? A statement that is true, valid, no matter what, any place, any time. Economic laws are tautologies, universally true. If the price of a good goes up, what happens to the quantity demand that goes down? I don't need observation. I don't need to go to the supermarket, sit down like mainstream economists and have a paper and say, oh, price went up by $1, quantity demanded went down, Kumi bought 2 less apples and then he bought 3 less apples, and then make all the calculations and then put the data, and I don't need observations. I don't need data analysis. If you close my eyes, you put me under the ground and you say, there are goods, there are constraints, there are scarcities in the world. I know that innately. And in my mind, internally, I could deduce that if the price of a good goes up, quantity demanded goes down. Natural law. Hi, please come in. This is David Gordon. That's giving me. Okay, I'll be done in a few minutes, and then David Gordon will be up here presenting his lecture on praxeology. Spanish scholastic, natural rights, private property, freedom to contract, freedom to trade, and freedom to travel and do commerce globally regardless of who the governing body is. With respect to the government rule, the Spanish scholastic advocated limits on government powers and taxes and regulations. They supported just war. right? To wage a war for self-defense, preventive war, to punish a guilty party. People's right to depose governments waging unjust war. You have the right to depose of your government in the case a war is unjust, and urge governments to obey ethical strictures against theft and murder. This, just to give you a historical context of the Spanish scholastic, these were times that most European countries, and in particular England, they were advancing and extending the theory of the divine right of the kings, the divinity of the kings. Right? So the Spanish scholastics are going against this trend and saying that there is putting restrictions, constraint on the rule of the monarchs, constraining their power. They're saying there are some natural rights, there should be some limits to the power of the king. One of those famous Spanish scholastics was Juan de Mariana, 1592. He wrote a book on the king and the royal institution. Believe it or not, the book was condemned. The book, not the author, because it was in Spain and this is in France. The book was condemned to death by the French Parliament, and the book was ceremoniously executed by burning it. Okay, so the book was put on trial. The book lost this case, her case. Okay, and the book was burned. The third wave in the Austrian tradition were the French physiocrats. They advocated for natural economic laws and contributed to the development of classical and later Austrian school of economic thought. The physiocrats believed that productivity and agricultural labor is a source of national wealth. This view obviously contrasted with mercantilism that we talked about. It was more accumulation of gold, of wealth via a positive trade, exchanges. Some of the principles of the physiocrats, they talk about natural order. They argued man did not come together, as Jean-Jacques Rousseau said, via arbitrary social contract, but human beings came together because of their cooperative instincts based on the division of labor and the rules of comparative advantage or the law of association. And this evolved through humankind's natural selfish behavior by exchanging favors, trading with one another. We benefit ourselves as well as others. Individualism and laissez-faire economics, self-interest motivates economic roles. Each individual is best suited to determine their end desired. Subjective desires are subjectively rational. The system works best when individuals can freely associate with one another. Restrictions place unnatural barriers to achieving one's goals, and they were advocates of free trade and less government intervention. Finally, last slide, they were strong proponents of private property rights, capital accumulation, right? The law of capital, I emphasized it several times. It serves a strategic function in the economy, okay? When you take natural resources, right? You put your capital, you take the natural resources, you turn it into final goods. If you make losses, right, that tells you that you're wasting those scarce resources, right? So the cost-benefit analysis. And it plays another important role because without capital accumulation, there will be no even civilization. There would be no economic progress. If you want to build a bridge, if you have an idea, an invention, innovation, how does that manifest itself in the marketplace? How do you put it? How do you produce it? You need capital. You need another individual, could be over there. He's been saving money over the years. He's been accumulating capital. And the moment when that capital is needed to invent and innovate, right, you're going to go and borrow from Kunmi. In return, Kunmi would get an interest rate on it. So interest rate, the idea of interest rate, the existence of interest rate is a direct implication of human action, right? To achieve your goals, right? You save some, and you're postponing your consumption of the goods and the service. There is risks associated with it. There is your subjective preference for the now versus the future, because the future is unknown. There is risk associated. There is mortality, right? So you're postponing your consumption of the good today for the future. You're taking risks, right? And that's why we pay an interest rate. That's why most people have credit cards, right? So the idea of capital accumulation plays a fundamental strategic role in society. And finally, capital is important for productivity and sustaining workers during the various stages of production. They need to be sustained, right? You need compensation. It may take years for the end result, for the bridge to be built, but during that time you need compensation. So capital plays a fundamental role, so they were in favor of capital accumulation. Again, this was a time, just like in time frame was most the Catholic Church was looking upon capital accumulation or charging an interest rate in a negative way. And these are the Spanish scholastics are going against the grain, right? They're supporting capital accumulation and the formation of the interest rate and the formation of capital. You can look up the rest. I'm going to leave that up to you. It's in your readings. The prominent members of the physiocrats. And I would like to stop here because I'm over time. We'll take a few minutes break, grab a coffee or tea, and then we'll be back in a few minutes. And David Gordon will be our lecturer. Okay, thank you.